It was a hot day on July 4th, 1839. For many weeks, various folks had been hard at work organizing this 10-acre plot of land in the middle of the newer city of Columbus, with several tables of food and gallons of grog for the celebration of the laying of the cornerstone for Ohio Statehouse. At that time, it was determined that the construction would be a 5-year process, costing no more than $450,000. Former Governor Jeremiah Morrow was on hand to make the dedicatory speech where he extolled, "Let the foundation be deep and strong. Let the materials be of nature's most lasting gifts, durable, imperishable. Let the edifice rise in solemn, simple grandeur, a monument of chaste and classic beauty." Little did they know that the construction would stretch beyond 20 years and the cost would more than triple. But indeed, they were able to create a building that exhibits some of the finest architecture in our country and reflects the very essence of our democratic ideals in our republic. This grand Greek Revival edifice would not last long in its initial state. Originally, all of Ohio's government was housed in its noble rooms. It would soon be altered and altered again to accommodate the growth of the state. By the 1980s, the 53 original rooms had been carved up into 317 spaces. Grand rooms were cut into 2 floors. If you worked on a second floor, you might be lucky enough to use the top of the boarded-up window as a storage space. Some offices were so small, guests had to sit in doorways. The original colors had been covered up with paint. Some rooms had more than 20 different coats. The house chambers, its ceiling once abundant with different hues, was painted white, it was said, to help with lighting for TV cameras.
Sitting in your office and having a piece of the ceiling fall on your head, or when a hearing room would be closed because a pipe had broken, and well, those were the kinds of things that happened pretty regularly.
I had a fire chief who was very knowledgeable. He came up to see me, and he parked in the underground parking garage and walked over to my office, and he says, "I've got 65 code violations, and I haven't even gone off of the hallway yet." I mean, it was a fire trap. It was a fire trap.
Despite all of the destructive renovations and alterations, visitors could still sense the magnificence below the many layers of paint and carved-up great rooms.
There weren't any fierce battles about, no, we shouldn't do it. I think there was bipartisan support.
Fortunately, in the 1980s, there was a bipartisan group of leaders who began looking for ways to restore the Capitol Square. Governor Celeste, with his legislative counterparts Speaker Rife, Senate President Gilmore, and Senator Aronoff, along with leaders Michelle and Nixon, working with Bill Flaherty at DAS, and the state architect Carol Olszewski, all began to envision a plan to save the buildings. Leader Michelle was pivotal in the 11th hour save of the Senate building from being subjected to a wrecking ball. Senate President Finan was instrumental in working to get the funds and engaging his relentlessness to finish the project. He, along with Governor Voinovich and Speaker Davidson, all saw to the completion of the project. It was these leaders who had the foresight to protect this priceless landmark. Led by the Columbus architecture firm Scully Caldwell and managed by the newly created Capitol Square Review and Advisory Board, the Statehouse would slowly regain its dignity. Winston Churchill stated that we shape our buildings and our buildings in turn shape us. The Statehouse was never meant to be just a place for government. It was designed to be a temple to the grand American experiment, democracy. Government officials and visitors can find in its rooms the literal feeling of democracy. In order to recapture this original tent, research was needed to discover the original materials and colors of the Statehouse. Bob Loversich and his team at Scully Caldwell, along with historical consultants Jeff Darby and Nancy Ritchie, pored over thousands of articles and documents to help discover the original ways the building looked and how it was finished. A 1940s history paper written by the Yale historian Abbott Lowell Cummings when he was just a grad student at Ohio State was discovered that provided a wealth of information.
At the time it was conceived, and by the time the foundations had been built, it was the largest state capitol in the country, which I think is very interesting. Ohio being a very important early addition to the original 13 states, and they certainly were making a very powerful statement.
CSRAB Director Ron Keller and his team were able to track down original furniture and a few of the busts and artifacts that had been in the Statehouse when it first opened. The busts of Lincoln and Governor Chase were returned to the Statehouse by an anonymous donor who had acquired them in a 1970s DAS sale for the total price of $25. A Columbus resident showed up with a swatch of dirty old carpet that turned out to be the original carpet in the house chambers. The carpet had been stored for almost 100 years in an old chicken coop still in their backyard.
Another thing we found was a photograph, an early photograph of the governor's office, and shortly after that we were going through the warehouse at the Ohio Historical Society and recognized a table that was sitting in their warehouse as the original governor's desk, and would not have made that connection without having found the photograph, without seeing the photograph from about the 1870 period.
Dozens of masonry workers were hired to restore the limestone and bricks throughout the building. Hundreds of construction workers climbed in and around the building for years, adding new mechanical systems, plumbing, and electrical systems. Construction ground to a halt for weeks when unaccounted for asbestos was discovered and had to be removed. Artisans were hired to recreate the wood carving in the decorative plasterwork, as well as hand paint the grain on all of the wooden doors and window surrounds, just as it had been done in the 1850s. Construction was stopped again after the electrical wire was put in place for a debate about how much of the newfangled internet wires should be included in the building, if any at all.
That's why in the Statehouse project it's been so important as one of the goals to make sure that it's a 21st century building.
The Capitol Square Foundation was developed as part of the restoration to continue to protect Capitol Square. The foundation has been instrumental to raise funds for parts of the restoration, the grand opening week, and continued funding of the essential projects like the museum, monuments, and programming. Bill and Susan Loda, Stan Aronoff, and Charlie Moses all have played leading roles to raise money for critical Statehouse projects like the paintings and furnishings. Many of the governor's portraits had been damaged from the years of sitting in unconditioned rooms and hallways. The foundation worked with Bob Evans and schoolchildren across Ohio to raise the funds for the rotunda skylight. Dozens of period-appropriate furniture pieces were acquired. The museum continues to evolve and expand due to the success of the foundation, with a display of Ohio's Constitution as one of the crowning achievements. On July 5, 1996, 157 years and 1 day since the cornerstone was put in place, Speaker Joanne Davidson rapped the gavel on the dais in the House chambers to open the session for the grand reopening of the Statehouse.
Today and over the next several days of gala events connected to the Capitol Square Revival celebration, the focus of the public's attention will be on the building, on the Statehouse, and on the tremendous job done in restoring these buildings to their historic glory. Yet as marvelous as this structure is today, and as much as I look forward to joining you in serving all Ohioans in these surroundings, let nobody misunderstand that it is what we achieve inside these walls that will serve as the true legacy of our efforts as the people's representatives.
This was the time where people could finally marvel at the restoration, while memories of the former buildings were still stuck in their heads. More than 20,000 visitors crowded in the newly restored Statehouse during its opening week. The Capitol Square Foundation has worked closely with the building stewards, the workers of CSRAB, to ensure the efforts put in to restore these grand buildings would not be lost. In the 25 years since the restoration, it has been helmed by only 3 directors, Ron Keller, Bill Carlton, and current director Laura Botticoletti. These 3 leaders have not only worked to protect the investment in Capitol Square, but also see that critical operations of the building continue to serve the needs of its inhabitants. Because this is a working building as well as a museum, there are constant needs for repair and continual updating. As Capitol Square is in its 2nd century of existence, it still continues to evolve to match the needs of our 21st century government.
The building has also been a significant landmark, I would say, in American political history. Political leaders from Lincoln to contemporary presidents have been on this site. A good many political leaders received at least their hands-on training in government here or nearby in the state offices that surrounded the site. So in that sense, it is, as we sometimes have said, almost a cradle of political leadership for the nation.
At that time, the greatest of the American state houses, and to this day is a focal point for the people of Ohio, and one which should serve as a continuing reminder of the importance of government in their lives.
I'm incredibly pleased and proud to see what has been accomplished. I mean, this is a state capitol that really sings with history and pride for anyone from Ohio who spends time here.
In the old days, Mary had her cafeteria there. God only knows what was going on. But today it's beautiful. It's a wonderful place to visit. It's wonderful for our children.
If you walk through here in the quiet of the evening, when the lights are on, it's a very, very special place. I hope the people of Ohio believe that this is a solid investment in what is the history and the tradition of the state of Ohio, because it's all in this building.
You know, when you go to work in the morning and you're in a dumpy, downtrodden looking place and your office is 3x5, there's not a lot of incentive to stay there very long. But I think when they come in and they see the beautiful offices that they have and their staff, and I think they're incentivized to do better work, is my opinion. And I think it's improved the quality of what the General Assembly is able to do.
Whether we are visitors or workers, each of us leaves our indelible mark in these structures. Maybe it's our shoes polishing and following in the worn grooves in the stairs, or it's in the echoes of our voices that linger in these arched rooms. When we take care of our buildings take care of us. The State House does more than just protect the inhabitants from the elements. It contains the history and the story of our state within its walls. The magnificent and challenging and complicated path this building has taken throughout history mirrors the magnificence, challenge, and complications of our democracy. We are the State House's keepers. It is up to us to continue to protect and foster these buildings as the representation of our love and our dedication to our great state, our great nation, and to our great democratic ideals.